The desert wind howled like a forgotten ghost, whipping sand across the cracked asphalt of Route 17, where the sun bled orange into the horizon. Victor Stone gripped the handlebars of his battered Harley, the engine's roar a dull thrum in his chest, matching the emptiness that had settled there years ago. At 39, he was a shadow of the man he'd once been, scarves of tattoos mapping old wounds, eyes like polished obsidian, reflecting nothing. The accident had taken more than his memory. It had hollowed him out, leaving a husk that rode with the Iron Promise crew, silent and unyielding. Tonight, the convoy stretched behind him, 50 bikes cutting through the dusk, headlights piercing the gloom like accusatory fingers. Up ahead, a flicker of movement shattered the monotony. A small figure huddled by the roadside, her pink backpack askew, tiny shoulders shaking with sobs that cut sharper than any blade. Rosie, 8 years old, her world upended in an instant. Her mother's car had swerved off the shoulder hours earlier, tires screeching against gravel before silence swallowed everything. Witnesses later whispered of a shadowy truck that didn't stop, vanishing into the twilight, leaving the girl alone with the twisted metal and the acrid scent of burnt rubber. She clutched a frayed stuffed bear, its button eyes staring blankly as tears carved paths through the dust on her cheeks. Terror gripped her, footsteps echoing in her mind, the fear of being lost forever in this vast, unforgiving expanse. Victor's bike slowed first, the growl fading to a rumble as he pulled over, boots crunching on the parched earth. The crew followed suit, engines cutting one by one until the night pressed in heavy and still. He dismounted, his leather jacket creaking, the patch on his back, Iron Promise, catching the last rays of light. Rosie looked up, her eyes wide pools of fear, expecting monsters from the stories her mom told, but Victor just stood there, staring down at her with those empty eyes, no flicker of recognition, no warmth. He was a stranger to himself, let alone to this child whose face tugged at some buried thread he couldn't grasp. The other bikers formed a loose circle, their faces weathered by sun and secrets, murmuring low. Jax, the grizzled vice president with a scar twisting his lip, knelt beside her. "Hey, kid," he said softly, his voice gravel wrapped in care. "What's your name?" Rosie hiccuped, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Rosie, my mommy." "The car." It flipped. Her words tumbled out, fragile as cracked glass, painting the horror of the crash, the jolt, the screams, the sudden quiet. Jax's jaw tightened. He'd seen too many roadside tragedies, but this one clawed at him. The crew exchanged glances. They were wanderers bound by oaths older than blood, protectors in a world that chewed up the innocent. Victor remained apart, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the truck had fled. Something stirred in him, a phantom ache in his arm, where ink etched a name he no longer recalled. Rosie, sensing safety in numbers, edged closer to the group, but her eyes kept drifting to him, the tallest, the quietest, with arms like forged steel. The wind carried the faint scent of wild sage, mingling with the metallic tang from the wreck site a mile back, where emergency lights now flashed in the distance. Sirens wailed faintly, too far to matter yet. As the crew radioed for help, Rosie slipped from Jax's side. Her small hand reaching out tentatively, she touched Victor's forearm, fingers tracing the faded tattoo beneath his rolled sleeve. Rosie, in looping script, surrounded by dates and symbols of vows long buried. The contact was electric, a spark jumping from her skin to his, igniting circuits long dormant. Victor froze, his breath catching as fragments assaulted him, blurry visions of hospital corridors, beeping monitors, a tiny hand in his during endless nights of vigil. Promises whispered in the dead of night. "I'll always keep you safe, Rosie, no matter what." He staggered back a step, knees buckling as he dropped to the dirt, the world tilting. The crew watched in stunned silence, the desert seeming to hold its breath. Rosie's touch had unlocked the vault, memories flooding in like a dam breaking. He wasn't just a biker, he was her guardian, sworn protector since her mother's desperate plea years ago, before the accident that stole his past. The wreck tonight wasn't random. It echoed the shadows of threats he'd once shielded her from. Corruption in high places that preyed on the vulnerable. Victor's eyes, once vacant, now burned with dawning fire. This child, this touch, it changed everything. The Iron Promise wasn't just a club. It was a covenant, and he'd forgotten his most sacred one. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights painting the bikers' faces in stark relief. Jax helped Rosie to her feet, but she clung to Victor now, her bear forgotten. "Uncle Vic," she whispered, the name a key turning in his soul. He nodded slowly, voice rough as rusted chains. "Yeah, kid, I'm here." The crew mobilized, bikes revving back to life, a wall of thunder against the encroaching dark. They wouldn't wait for the authorities, not when trust had been shattered before. Victor lifted Rosie onto his bike, her arms wrapping around his waist, a fragile anchor pulling him from the abyss. As they rode out, the convoy, a serpent of light snaking toward the unknown, Victor felt the weight of redemption settle. The tattoo burned under his skin, a reminder that some promises outlast even the self. The road ahead twisted with dangers, shadowy figures pulling strings from boardrooms and back alleys, justice twisted into knots. But with Rosie pressed against him, the wind whipping her hair, he remembered why he rode, not for glory, but for the quiet honor of keeping one small light from going out. The hospital lights loomed on the outskirts of town, a beacon in the night. Victor's mind raced, piecing together the gaps, the accident that had claimed his memories. The years he'd wandered as a ghost among brothers. Rosie had been hidden away after her mother's troubles began. A web of deceit involving local power brokers who'd eyed her family's land. He'd promised to protect her, etched it into his flesh, then lost it all in a crash engineered to silence him. Now, with her touch, the truth clawed back. Inside the sterile halls of Mercy General, doctors swarmed, but Victor's crew stood sentinel, a phalanx of leather and resolve. Rosie was checked for bruises, her story spilling in halting words, but Victor's focus sharpened on the shadows outside. A call came through Jax's phone, a tip from an old contact. The truck's plates traced to a shell company, ties to the very corruption he'd once fought. The promise reignited a war he thought ended. By dawn, as the first light gilded the bikes parked in formation, Victor stood watch over Rosie's sleeping form. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a fierce clarity. He'd ride for her, gather the promise, unearth the lies. In a world of broken oaths, one touch had forged him anew. Guardian, brother, avenger in silence. The desert whispered secrets, and he was ready to listen. The fluorescent hum of Mercy General's hallway buzzed like a distant swarm, casting long shadows that danced across the linoleum floor. Victor Stone sat rigid in the vinyl chair beside Rosie's bed, his calloused hands clasped tight, knuckles whitening against the memories still crashing through him. The room smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender from the stuffed bear clutched in her small fists, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. Outside the window, the desert dawn painted the sky in strokes of pale gold, gilding the lineup of Harleys like silent sentinels. The Iron Promise crew had claimed the parking lot, their engines cooled but spirits ignited, a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten wars and unbreakable vows. Jax leaned against the doorframe, his broad frame blocking the corridor from prying eyes. He'd been Victor's anchor through the lost years, pulling him back from the edge after the crash that shattered his mind, like fragile glass. "She's tough, Vic," Jax murmured, voice low as the rumble of her idling bike. "Like her mum was. But that truck, it's no coincidence." Victor nodded, his gaze never leaving Rosie. The tattoo on his arm itched beneath the sleeve, a living brand now. Rosie, etched with the date of her birth, and a tiny iron chain linking it to his own scars. Flashes came unbidden. Nights in this very hospital, years back, when her mother, Elena, lay pale and broken from an accident that reeked of sabotage. Elena's eyes, fever-bright, locking onto his. "Promise me, Vic, keep her safe. They're coming for us, for the land, for everything." He'd sworn it then, ink sealing the oath as she slipped away, leaving him Rosie's shadow guardian. A nurse padded in, her footsteps soft, clipboard in hand. "She's stable, just dehydrated and scared. We'll keep her overnight for observation." Victor's jaw clenched. Observation meant exposure, and the shadows Elena feared lingered in places like this, corrupt threads weaving through small-town officials and faceless suits. The tip Jax mentioned burned in his mind. The truck's plates linked to frontier holdings, a shell masking land grabs that devoured families like Rosie's. Elena had fought them. Her modest ranch, the last holdout against a pipeline route that promised progress but delivered poison. Victor had been her ally, a vet turned rider, until the crash wiped it clean. Now it roared back, a beast demanding reckoning. As the nurse left, Rosie's eyes fluttered open, hazy with remnants of fear. She sat up slowly, the hospital gown swallowing her frame, and reached for him. "Uncle Vic, it hurts. My arm." He gently rolled back her sleeve, revealing faint bruises, marks suggesting rough handling, not from the crash alone. Rage simmered low in his gut, but he swallowed it, tracing the skin with a feather-light touch. "We'll fix it, kid. Promise." The word hung heavy, echoing the vow that had defined him before amnesia turned it to dust. She smiled faintly, trusting, and in that moment the emptiness in his chest cracked wider, letting purpose flood in. Down the hall, voices rose, sharp, authoritative. Victor tensed as two officers approached, badges glinting under the lights, flanked by a suit with a clipboard and a smirk too polished for dawn. Sheriff Harlan, a man whose name surfaced in Victor's resurfacing haze, tied to the same web that snared Elena. "Mr. Stone," Harlan drawled, eyes narrowing at the biker patch. "Heard you scooped up the girl. Witnesses say you hightailed it from the scene. Care to explain?" Jax stepped forward, a wall of leather, but Victor rose, calm as desert stone. "Explaining's easy. Found her alone, scared. My crew helped, that's all." Harlan's gaze flicked to Rosie, then back, calculating. "She's a ward of the state now. Crash like that. Mother's gone, no kin listed. We'll take her into protective custody." The word protective twisted like a knife. Victor knew the game, foster mills greased by developers, kids vanishing into systems that served the powerful. Rosie's hand tightened on his, her whisper cutting through, "Don't let them take me, Uncle Vic." The officers shifted, hands near holsters. The air thickening with unspoken threats. Jax's radio crackled softly. Another brother outside feeding intel. Harlan's cruiser plates matched reports of intimidation runs on holdout properties. Victor's mind raced, piecing the puzzle. The crash tonight mirrored Elena's, shadowy vehicle, no witnesses, a child left as bait. Frontier Holdings wasn't just after land, they erased opposition, burying secrets under layers of red tape. He'd fought them once, rallying the promise to stand guard, their rides a thunderous deterrent. But the accident had silenced him, labeled him unreliable, a ghost, unfit for oaths. Now, facing Harlan's cold stare, the moral chasm yawned. Hand Rosie over to wolves in uniform, or defy the badge, honoring the ink on his skin. "I am her kin," Victor said, voice steady as forged steel, stepping between them and the bed. "Legal guardian, check the records. Elena's will name me." Harlan chuckled low and mocking. "Old news, Stone. Crash fried your brain, remember? Courts'll sort it." But doubt flickered in his eyes. The crew outside revved engines in unison, a low growl vibrating the windows, reminding all of the promise's reach. Rosie buried her face in Victor's side, her trust a quiet fire fueling his resolve. The standoff stretched, tension coiling like a spring. Harlan's radio buzzed, a dispatch about unidentified vehicles at the lot, and he backed off a step, bluff called. "This ain't over," he muttered, suit in tow, retreating down the hall. Victor exhaled, the weight of the moment settling. He'd bought time, but the war simmered. Jax clapped his shoulder. "We ride at noon. Call the chapters. Full muster. For her. For Elena." As Rosie drifted back to sleep, Victor stepped to the window, watching the crew mill below. The sun climbed higher, baking the asphalt, the scent of hot metal wafting in. Memories sharpened, late-night strategy sessions in dusty clubhouses. Brothers sharing scars from battles not on foreign soil, but right here, against greed that devoured the innocent. The Iron Promise wasn't outlaws. They were keepers of forgotten lines, Lealdad etched deeper than law. Victor's hand rested on the tattoo, feeling the raised ink like a heartbeat. Redemption wasn't a flash, it was this, standing firm, chosen family closing ranks. By midday, the hospital released Rosie into his care, papers signed amid wary glances. She rode pillion on his bike, arms secure around him, the convoy swelling to 70 strong as word spread through the network. They headed north, toward the old ranch, a sanctuary ringed by canyons and loyalty. But shadows followed, tires on the horizon, whispers of warrants brewing. Victor glanced back. Rosie's laughter faint against the wind, a sound like hope breaking through storm clouds. The promise pulled him forward, a thread weaving through loss toward justice, one silent mile at a time. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The canyon walls rose like ancient guardians on either side of the winding trail, their red rock faces etched by centuries of relentless sun and storm. Victor's Harley led the convoy, the engine's steady pulse vibrating through his bones as dust clouds billowed in their wake. Rosie clung to him, her small frame a warm weight against his back. Her cheek pressed to the leather of his jacket. The wind carried the sharp tang of sagebrush and sun-baked earth, whipping her hair into a wild halo that caught the midday glare. Behind them, the Iron Promise stretched out. 70 bikes now, brothers from distant chapters converging like iron filings to a magnet, their leathers scarred by miles and memories. Jax rode flank. His eyes scanning the rear view for the shadows Victor sensed closing in. The old ranch emerged from the haze, a weathered sprawl of timber and stone nestled in a valley fold, its fences sagging but unyielding. Eleanor's place, Rosie's inheritance, the heart of the fight that had drawn Victor into the fray years ago. He could almost hear her voice now, clear as a desert echo. "This land's our blood. Vic, don't let them take it." The crash that stole his past had left the property vulnerable, paperwork tangled in bureaucratic webs spun by frontier holdings. They'd circled like vultures, offering pennies for the acres rich with underground springs, key to their poisoned pipeline dreams. Victor eased the bike to a stop in the yard, gravel crunching under tires as the crew fanned out, forming a perimeter of watchful eyes and crossed arms. Rosie slid down, her sneakers kicking up puffs of dirt as she ran toward the porch, the stuffed bear dangling from one hand. "Home!" she breathed, turning back with a grin that pierced Victor like sunlight through cracks. But his smile faltered, the air felt charged, heavy with the residue of neglect. Windows boarded, weeds clawing at the steps, signs of time's cruel passage since Elena's fall. He followed her up, boot heels thudding on the warped wood, the door creaking open to reveal dust-shrouded rooms that smelled of faded lavender and old paper. Inside, on the kitchen table, lay the remnants of their life. Eleanor's journals, yellowed maps marked with red lines denoting the contested borders, and a faded photo of Victor holding newborn Rosie, his face alive with a joy he'd forgotten. Jax entered behind him, wiping sweat from his brow. Scouts spotted a tail. Black SUVs, unmarked. Harlan's boys, no doubt. Victor nodded, his fingers tracing the photo's edge, memories solidifying like cooling metal. The promise had stood here before, bikes ringing the property during Elena's last stand, their presence a silent vow against the encroaching dark. But betrayal had come from within. A brother turned informant, feeding intel to the suits for a cut of the spoils. The crash followed, Victor's bike sabotaged on a rain-slick road, wires cut to mimic fate. He'd survived, but the void claimed the why of his rides, leaving him adrift until Rosie's touch reignited the flame. As the crew settled in, some checking fences, others brewing coffee on a makeshift fire, Victor pulled Rosie aside to the back porch, where the canyon's shadow offered a sliver of cool. "Tell me what happened tonight, kid. Everything." She sat on the swing, chains squeaking softly, and recounted the blur. The car humming along the highway, her mum's laughter, then the sudden slam of impact, glass shattering like brittle promises. "A big truck hit us, Uncle Vic. Mommy yelled for me to hold on then." "Nothing. I woke up alone." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held steady, mirroring the resilience Elena had instilled. Victor knelt, level with her, the tattoo on his arm a visible thread between them. "You did good, Rosie. Brave." The words carried the weight of absolution. For her and for the years he'd failed to remember, a low rumble echoed from the ridge, engines, deliberate and closing. Victor stood, signaling Jax with a sharp whistle, the crew mobilized without a word, bikes firing up in a chorus of thunder that shook the valley. From the bluff, 3 SUVs crested, dust plumes trailing like accusations, flanked by a county cruiser with Harlan at the wheel. They halted at the gate, doors opening to reveal deputies in crisp uniforms, rifles slung low, and the sheriff himself, his face a mask of false authority under the wide-brim hat. "Stone!" Harlan called, voice amplified by the wind. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Girl comes with us. State's orders." Victor stepped forward, the porch creaking under his weight. Rosie peeking from behind his leg. The standoff hummed with tension, the air thick as the moment before a storm breaks. "This is her home, Harlan. My home. Check the deeds. Elena's will stands." The sheriff's eyes narrowed, flicking to the tattoo, then to the wall of bikers now revving in unison. A wall of sound that pressed against the intruders like an invisible force. One deputy shifted uneasily, hand hovering near his radio. Whispers of the promise's reputation, not criminals, but unyielding shields for the forsaken, rippled through their ranks. Harlan leaned against his cruiser, arms crossed, the suit from the hospital hovering at his side like a serpent's shadow. Deeds, will, all that's tied up in court, courtesy of eminent domain, progress stone. That pipeline brings jobs, water for the masses. Lies wrapped in silk, Victor saw through it now, the corruption's core. Frontier bribing officials to reroute through sacred ground, poisoning wells and displacing families for profit. Elena had exposed a whistleblower's report, buried under threats, her accident a warning. Tonight's crash, a escalation meant to orphan Rosie and clear the path. "You mean greed," Victor replied, voice calm, but edged like a blade. "Elena's fighting you woke up. We're finishing it." The crew's engines swelled, a tactical roar that vibrated the ground, forcing the deputies back a step. Rosie squeezed his hand, her whisper fierce. "Don't give in, Uncle Vic. Mom said you're our iron." The words fueled him. A reminder of chosen bonds, stronger than blood or badge. Harlan's bluff cracked. He gestured to his men, retreating to the vehicles with muttered curses. "This'll go to the judge. You'll lose everything." As the SUVs peeled away, kicking gravel, The convoy's rumble faded to a watchful hum. Victor turned to his brothers, Jax at his side. "We dig deeper. Contacts in the city. Pull records. Trace the money." Nods rippled through the group, a silent pact renewed. The afternoon sun dipped, casting long shadows over the ranch, the canyon walls glowing like embers. Inside, Victor sat with Rosie by the window, her head on his shoulder as she sketched maps from memory, tiny lines of defense. The emptiness was a distant echo now. In its place, purpose burned steady. Night fell soft over the valley, stars pricking the velvet sky like promises etched in light. Sentries posted, the crew shared stories around the fire, tales of lost comrades, oaths kept in the face of worse odds. Victor listened, the tattoo a warm pulse under his skin, anchoring him to this moment. The road to justice twisted ahead, laced with dilemmas. Expose the web without dragging innocence under, honor Elena's fight without becoming the monsters they opposed. But with Rosie safe in his watch, the iron promise whole, he felt the weight of redemption lighten. One touch had mended the fracture. Now they would ride as one, silent thunder against the storm. The desert night whispered of trials to come, but Victor was ready. Guardian reborn in the fire of memory. The fire crackled low in the pit, sending sparks spiraling into the starlit canopy like fleeting prayers. Victor Stone sat on a weathered log, the ranch's backyard a makeshift camp under the canyon's watchful gaze. The scent of burning mesquite mingled with the earthy dampness rising from the cooling ground, a balm against the day's tension. Rosie slept inside, tucked into Elena's old quilt on the sagging couch, her breaths even through the open window. The Iron Promise crew encircled the flames, 70 strong, faces illuminated in flickering orange, leathers creased from the ride, eyes reflecting the quiet resolve of men who'd traded wars abroad for battles closer to home. Jax tossed another branch onto the blaze, embers popping like distant gunfire. Harlan's pulling strings fast, word from our city eyes, warrants brewing for unlawful assembly and interfering with an investigation. His voice was a low rumble, laced with the gravel of too many smokes and suspicions. Victor stared into the fire, the tattoo on his arm a shadowed outline beneath his sleeve, pulsing with the heat. Memories had flooded back in waves since Rosie's touch. Nights like this one, years prior, when the crew had first rallied for Elena. They'd uncovered Frontier's bribes then, envelopes slipped under doors, threats veiled as community benefits. But the informant, a brother named Reese, lured by promises of easy money, had sold them out, leading to Victor's crash. Reese's face haunted him now, a ghost of betrayal amid the flames. A younger rider, Marco, leaned forward, his ponytail tied back, knife scars on his knuckles glinting. "We hit back smart, Vic. No guns, just truth. I got a line on an old clerk at the county office, owes Jax a favor from Nam days." Nods rippled around the circle, the crew's bond a tapestry of shared scars, vets like Victor, mechanics who'd lost homes to the same greed, wanderers seeking purpose in the roar of engines. They weren't vigilantes, they were the unspoken oath-keepers, family forged in the crucible of loss. Victor felt it settle deeper. This lealdad, a word Elena had taught him, meaning loyalty that bent but never broke. For Rosie, for the land that cradled her mother's dreams, he'd unearthed the rot without staining his hands. Dawn crept in slow, painting the canyon rims in blush hues, the air crisp with dew-kissed sage. Victor rose early, boots silent on the porch as he brewed coffee over the embers, black and strong like the resolve hardening in his chest. Rosie stirred inside, padding out in oversized socks, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Uncle Vic, can we fix the swing today?" Her voice was a thread of normalcy, pulling him from the shadows. He ruffled her hair, the gesture automatic now, memories anchoring it, pushing her on that very swing as a toddler, laughter echoing while Elena watched from the kitchen window, her smile a rare light in their guarded world. "After we talk to some folks, kid, keep you safe first." The crew scattered on errands, scouts to town for supplies, others to wiretap the fences with motion sensors scavenged from old rides. Victor and Jax took the lead truck, an unmarked Ford borrowed from a brother, heading to the county outskirts where the clerk, Mrs. Harlan, no relation to the sheriff, thank the stars, waited in a dingy diner off the old highway. The place smelled of grease and stale pie, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. She slid into the booth across from them, her grey bun tight, eyes darting to the door. "You bikers again? Elena's fight? It never dies, does it?" Her hands trembled as she passed a manila envelope, thick with photocopies, deeds falsified, signatures forged on Elena's will, Frontier's money trail looping through shell accounts to the sheriff's re-election fund. Victor's fingers tightened on the papers, the ink blurring slightly in the dim light, dates matching his resurfacing haze, the crash timed to bury the evidence. They targeted her after the whistleblower report, poison in the soil tests, bribes to overlook it. Mrs. Harlan nodded, voice a whisper. And the girl, Rosie's crash? Same playbook. Truck driver vanished, but plates reroute to a company garage owned by Harlan's cousin. They're tying up loose ends. Orphan the kid, claim the land as abandoned. Jax's jaw set like concrete. Betrayal's sting echoed Reese's fall, but this was institutional, a cancer in the system's veins. Victor's mind raced. Expose it publicly. Risk Rosie's safety. Go quiet. Let the corruption fester. The moral fork twisted deep. Justice demanded light, but honor shielded the innocent first. Back at the ranch by noon, the envelope's contents spread across the kitchen table like a war map. Rosie colored nearby, her crayons scratching soft against paper, oblivious to the storm brewing. Marco arrived with news. Reese spotted in town, skulking at a bar tied to Frontier. "He's the key, Vic. Turn him or end him quiet." The words hung heavy, testing the promise's code. No blood if words sufficed. Victor paced the creaky floorboards, the scent of dust and revelation thick. Redemption wasn't vengeance. It was reclaiming the man Elena saw in him, the guardian who'd etched her daughter's name into his soul. We talked to him. Bring the truth home. As the sun arced high, baking the yard in relentless gold, a distant engine growl pierced the quiet. Scouts signaling company. Victor stepped outside, Jax at his flank, the crew forming ranks without command. From the ridge, a lone bike crested, Reese, his frame gaunt, leathers frayed, eyes hollow as Victor's once were. He dismounted slow, hands raised, the wind tugging at his patch. Still iron, faded but unbroken. "Vic, heard you remembered. Rosie. She's why I ran." His voice cracked, regret a raw edge. The standoff hummed, brothers tense, rifles imagined in every shadow. Reese knelt, envelope clutched like confession. "I fed them lies to save my skin, but Elena, she saved me first, pulled me from the bottle after Nam. I can fix it. Testify, names, dates." Victor approached, the ground crunching under boots, Rosie's face flashing in his mind, trusting, untouched by the world's cruelty. The tattoo burned a reminder, promises outlast mistakes. "Stand with us, brother, for her." Reese nodded, tears carving tracks through road dust, the circle closing around him not in judgment, but reclamation. The canyon echoed with a collective exhale, the fire of loyalty reigniting. But Harlan's web tightened, a radio crackle warned of incoming raids, the sheriff's play to seize the ranch under public safety. Victor lifted Rosie onto his shoulders as the crew mobilized, engines stirring like awakening beasts. The path to justice wound steeper, dilemmas sharpening. Forgive the fallen, confront the corrupt, all while cradling the fragile light of one child's world. Dusk bled purple across the valley, the air cooling to a whisper as sentries took posts. Inside, Victor read to Rosie from Elena's journal, words of hope amid the fight, her small hand tracing the pages. The emptiness was a scar now, healed by touch and trial. The iron promise stood whole, oaths renewed in silence, ready to ride against the gathering storm. Redemption unfolded mile by mile, a quiet thunder building toward the reckoning. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of honor and hope to more riders on the road. The valley thrummed with the low growl of engines idling in the gathering dusk, a symphony of restrained power that vibrated through the ranch's weathered bones. Victor Stone stood on the porch, the cool evening breeze carrying the faint metallic bite of impending rain from the canyon walls. Rosie's laughter echoed from inside, a fragile melody cutting through the tension as she chased fireflies with Marco's help, her small feet pattering on the floorboards. The Iron Promise crew moved like shadows in the fading light, scouts adjusting tripwires along the fences, others checking fuel lines under the star's first pricks. Reese knelt nearby, his hands still gripping the envelope of evidence, face etched with the hollows of a man clawing back from his own abyss. Victor watched him, the tattoo on his arm a steady ache, reminding him that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was the forge of true oaths. Jax approached, his boots silent on the gravel, radio clipped to his belt crackling with static whispers from the perimeter. Raids inbound, 2 hours tops. Harlan's calling in deputies from the next county, got a judge's rubber stamp for eviction. They're framing it as a safety sweep after the crash. His eyes, shadowed by the brim of his cap, met Victor's with the weight of shared history. Memories surged unbidden. Reese's betrayal years back, the night he'd slipped away after tipping off Frontier about Elena's evidence cache, leading to the sabotage that hurled Victor's bike into oblivion. But Reese's confession burned fresh, his voice breaking as he detailed the coercion, Frontier's threats against his own hidden family, a daughter lost to the system much like Rosie nearly was. Victor had seen the parallel, the cycle of corruption that preyed on the vulnerable, twisting loyalty into chains. "We use this," Victor said, tapping the envelope, his voice low and even, like the hum of a well-tuned motor. "Reese rides with us to the city tomorrow, testify to the feds. Not the locals, but tonight we hold the line without spilling blood." The crew murmured agreement, their circle tightening around the fire pit where embers glowed like defiant eyes. No one here sought glory in violence. They were the quiet enforcers of moral reckonings, vets and wanderers, bound by promises that outlasted badges and boardrooms. Rosie emerged then, a jar of captured lights in her hands, her face alight with wonder. "Look, Uncle Vic, they're like stars we can keep." He knelt, the glow illuminating the ink on his skin, and for a moment the world's shadows receded, her trust a balm on old wounds. As midnight cloaked the ranch, the first rain pattered soft against the tin roof, turning the yard to slick mud that gleamed under the crew's lanterns. Sentries signaled from the ridge, a convoy of lights snaking down the highway, cruisers flanked by unmarked vans, their tires hissing on wet asphalt. Victor positioned himself at the gate, Rosie safely inside with a handful of trusted watchers, her bear clutched tight. The Promise formed ranks, bikes lined like iron barricades, engines off but ready, headlights dimmed to slits that pierced the downpour. Harlan's cruiser led the approach, wipers slashing rhythmically, the sheriff's silhouette stark against the dash lights. He stepped out into the rain, slicker dripping, flanked by 6 deputies in riot gear, flashlights cutting beams through the sheets of water. "Stone! Last chance! Clear out, or we do it for you!" Harlan bellowed, voice muffled by the storm, his hand resting casual on his holster. The air thickened, rain mingling with the scent of wet leather and oiled metal, tension coiling like a spring in the dark. Victor stepped forward, unmoving, water streaming down his face, pooling at his boots. "This land's legal, girls safe here. Your sweep smells like a grab, frontiers pulling your leash." Murmurs from the deputies, unease rippling as Reese emerged from the shadows, envelope raised like a white flag. "Sheriff, I got proof. Bribes, forgeries, your name's on it. End this quiet or it goes public by dawn." Harlan's face twisted, rain masking the flicker of panic in his eyes, but he recovered with a sneer. "Traitor scum, you're under arrest for obstruction." Deputies advanced, batons drawn, the mud sucking at their boots as the crew shifted, a wall of resolve without a single weapon drawn. Jax's radio buzzed. A brother in town feeding live updates, media tipped off anonymously, local news vans en route, drawn by whispers of biker standoff laced with corruption hints. The sheriff hesitated, the downpour amplifying every breath, every creak of leather. Victor's mind raced through the ethical maze, force a retreat and risk escalation, or let them push, exposing the rot in the glare of lights and lenses. Honor demanded the latter, truth as the blade, not fists. A deputy's flashlight caught Rosie's face at the window, her small hand waving uncertainly, and something cracked in the line. One officer, younger, lowered his baton, muttering, "Kids involved. This ain't right." Harlan barked an order, but doubt spread like the rain, boots shuffling back. Reese stepped closer, voice steady despite the tremor. "I sold out once, for fear. Won't again. Elena trusted the promise. So do I." The words hung, a bridge over the chasm of betrayal, pulling even Harlan's men into pause. Sirens wailed distant, news choppers. No reinforcements. But the tide turned as flashes erupted from the highway, reporters spilling out with cameras rolling. Harlan cursed under his breath, signaling retreat with a sharp wave. "This ain't done, Stone. Courts'll bury you." The convoy reversed, taillights blurring into the storm, leaving the ranch to the rain's relentless song. Victor exhaled, the crew's cheers muted, a nod to the victory born of words, not war. Inside, he wrapped Rosie in a dry blanket, her jar of fireflies pulsing soft on the table. "They gone?" she asked, eyes wide. "For now, kid, but we're stronger." Jax clapped Reese's shoulder, the prodigal's place reclaimed, his testimony the key to unraveling the web. Dawn broke grey and sodden, the canyon steaming as the sun clawed through clouds. The crew assessed the night. Fences intact, no shots fired, evidence secured. Victor pored over the documents by lantern light, tracing the money's path. Frontier's executives to Harlan's pockets, the pipeline's toxic blueprint hidden in development plans. A new memory surfaced, Elena's final whisper in the hospital, urging him to protect not just Rosie, but the land's quiet legacy, springs that fed the valley's lifeblood. The dilemma sharpened. Ride to the city alone with Reese, risking ambush, or muster the full promise, turning exposure into a thunderous stand. By mid-morning, bikes revved in formation, Rosie secured in a sidecar rigged by Marco, her face pressed to the window with quiet determination. Victor led the way north, the wet road shimmering like forged steel. The convoy, a serpent of light against the lingering mist. Reese rode beside him, redemption's weight lightening with each mile. Whispers on the wind carried hints of pursuit, Harlan's calls to higher strings. But the moral fire burned brighter. Justice wasn't conquest, it was the slow unveiling, oaths honored in the face of storms. The tattoo warmed under Victor's sleeve, Rosie's name a compass pointing true. Ahead, the city loomed, a concrete jungle laced with lies, but with family chosen at his back, he rode toward the heart of the reckoning, one rain-washed turn at a time. The desert's edge gave way to sprawl, billboards flickering promises of progress amid the haze. Victor's grip tightened on the handlebars, the engine's roar a steady vow. Redemption unfolded not in grand clashes, but in these silent miles, where loyalty bridged the fractures of the past. Rosie hummed a tune from Elena's lullabies, her voice a thread weaving hope through the gathering clouds. The promise pressed on, unbreakable, toward the truth that would free them all. The city's skyline clawed at the overcast sky like jagged iron teeth, a far cry from the canyon's open embrace. Victor Stone navigated the convoy through the labyrinth of concrete veins, the Harley's engine thrumming a defiant rhythm against the urban cacophony. Honking horns, distant sirens, the metallic tang of exhaust hanging heavy in the air. Rosie rode secure in the sidecar, her small hands gripping the edges, eyes wide at the towering glass facades that reflected the promise's procession like distorted mirrors. 70 bikes snaked behind him, a rolling testament to unbreakable bonds, their leathers slick from the morning's lingering mist. Jax flanked Victor's left, Reese on the right, the redeemed brother's posture straight for the first time in years, the envelope of evidence tucked in his saddlebag like a loaded promise. They pulled into the shadow of the federal building, a monolith of stone and secrets on the edge of downtown, its steps worn by footsteps seeking justice or fleeing it. The crew dismounted in unison, boots echoing on the pavement as they formed a loose cordon around Rosie, who clutched her bear like a talisman. The air buzzed with the low murmur of midday traffic, coffee vendors hawking steaming cups that wafted bitter aromas, mingling with the faint ozone scent of an approaching storm. Victor cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying his pulse. The tattoo on his arm, a warm reminder beneath the rolled sleeve, Rosie's name, woven with dates of vows that had survived the void. Inside, the lobby stretched cool and echoing, marble floors polished to a sheen that caught the fluorescent glow. Security eyed the bikers warily, hands twitching near radios, but Victor's voice cut through calm as desert wind. "We're here to see Agent Torres. Tell him Iron Promise rides for truth." Minutes stretched like taut wire until a door swung open. Torres emerging. Lean, sharp-eyed, a Fed with scars hidden under his suit, once a contact from Elena's early fights. He nodded to Jax, then fixed on Victor, recognition flickering. "Stone. Heard the rumors. You back from the ghosts?" Victor met his gaze, the weight of lost years in his nod. For her, for the land they tried to bury. They filed into a conference room, blinds drawn against the city's glare, the table scarred from countless battles of paper and proof. Rosie sat beside Victor, her crayons pulled from the sidecar, now sketching canyons on a notepad, a quiet anchor amid the tension. Reese spread the documents. Forged deeds yellowed at the edges, bank transfers looping like nooses from Frontier's vaults to Harlan's accounts, soil reports redacted to hide the pipeline's venomous blueprint. Torres pored over them, his pen tapping a steady beat, the room thick with the scent of stale coffee and printer ink. "This ties it. Eminent domain twisted into theft. Elena's whistleblower file matches. Harlan's the linchpin, but the suits up top pull harder." Victor's mind churned, ethical currents pulling at him. Hand over the evidence and trust a system laced with the same rot. Or push for more, risking Rosie's exposure to the wolves circling outside. Memories sharpened, Elena's journal entries read by firelight, her warnings of feds bought off like local badges. "They'll bury it unless we force light," he said, voice low. Torres leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I can subpoena, but it'll take days. Harlan's already lawyered up, spinning your crew as threats. Girl's custody hearing tomorrow. State wants her in protection." Rosie's crayon paused, her eyes lifting, a flicker of fear that twisted Victor's gut like barbed wire. Jax shifted, his chair creaking. "We hold the ranch till then. But Reese, your word seals it." The brother nodded, sweat beading on his brow despite the room's chill, his confessions spilling in measured tones. The night he cracked under Frontier's pressure, trading Elena's safe house location for a promise of amnesty that never came. They hit Vic's bike to scatter us, thought amnesia would end it. But Rosie's touch, It woke the oath in him, in all of us. Torres's eyes narrowed, weighing the redemption against the risk. The air humming with the moral tightrope, absolve a traitor for the greater unmasking, or let justice's blade fall uneven. Outside, as the meeting broke, thunder rumbled distant, the sky darkening to slate. The crew remounted, but Victor lingered with Torres on the steps, rain spitting cold flecks on the stone. Protect her in the hearing, the promise stands witness. The agent clasped his shoulder, a silent pact forged in shared disdain for corruption's veil. Rosie tugged Victor's hand, her sketch of the ranch clutched tight. "Will they let us go home, Uncle Vic?" He knelt, rain dampening his knees, the city's pulse fading to her small world. "Yeah, kid, home's where the promises are." The words carried Elena's echo, a vow against the storm. Back on the road, the convoy carved through traffic, headlights piercing the gathering gloom like accusatory beams. Reese rode steady, his bike humming beside Victor's, the envelope now duplicated and couriered to safe hands. But shadows trailed, a sleek sedan weaving in the mirrors, plates obscured by the downpour, Harlan's reach extending like ink in water. Jax radioed ahead. "Eyes on the tail. Lose 'em at the interchange." The chase unfolded subtle, no Hollywood blaze, just calculated turns through rain-slicked alleys, the wipers slashing rhythmically as tension coiled. Victor's heart pounded, the dilemma acute. Evade and buy time for the feds, or confront drawing bloodless lines in the moral sand. They shook the pursuer at an underpass, emerging onto the highway slick and shining, the desert's edge calling them back. Rosie hummed softly in the sidecar, her jar of fireflies from nights past, imagined in the dashboard glow. The crew pressed on, miles blurring into resolve, the tattoo a compass under Victor's skin. Redemption wasn't a single clash. It was this weave of loyalty, Reese's turnaround, Torres's nod, the brothers' unyielding ranks, stitching fractures into armor. But the hearing loomed, Harlan's web tightening with whispers of fabricated charges, the pipeline's greed poised to swallow the ranch whole. Night deepened as they crested the final ridge, the ranch lights a beacon in the valley below, sentries' fires flickering like steadfast stars. Victor eased to a stop, the engine's heat radiating against the chill, Rosie yawning against his arm. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, the canyon whispering secrets of trials yet to unfold. Inside, the crew gathered, maps unrolled by lamplight, plotting testimony and contingencies. Reese shared a quiet word with Marco, bonds mending in the glow, while Jax monitored channels for Fed updates. Victor sat with Rosie, her head on his lap, reading from Elena's journal, tales of resilience, promises that bent the world toward right. Sleep came fitful, dreams laced with the crash's echo and Harlan's sneer, but dawn brought clarity. The hearing was set. The promise would ride en masse, a thunderous presence outside the courthouse, not to intimidate, but to embody the honor the corrupt had forsaken. Victor traced the tattoo, Rosie's fingers mirroring his, the touch a bridge across lost time. The moral fire burned steady, justice through truth, loyalty as the unyielding road. As engines stirred in the yard, the valley awoke to their roar, a covenant rolling toward the city's heart once more. The storm had passed, but the reckoning brewed, oaths pulling them forward into the light of what must be. The courthouse loomed like a granite sentinel in the city's heart, its columns scarred by decades of verdicts both just and twisted. Victor Stone led the convoy through the morning haze, the Harley's growl merging with the urban din, tires hissing on damp streets, the faint ozone tang of yesterday's rain clinging to the air. Rosie's sidecar bobbed gently, her small face framed by the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon with a mix of trepidation and unyielding trust. Behind them, the iron promise swelled to near 100 now, chapters converging from shadowed corners of the map, their engines a rolling thunder that turned heads and silenced chatter. Jax rode close, Reese a steady shadow on the flank. The envelope's duplicates secured in federal hands, but its truth burning in every rider's gaze. They parked in formation blocks away, a sea of chrome and leather spilling onto the sidewalks, not encroaching but present, a silent wall of resolve under the overcast sky. Victor dismounted, lifting Rosie into his arms, her weight a grounding force against the knot in his chest. The tattoo on his arm itched beneath the jacket, Rosie's name a pulse, sinking with her heartbeat against his shoulder. Memories wove tighter now. Elena's hand in his during Rosie's birth, the ink needle's sting sealing the vow amid hospital beeps and whispered fears. "This hearing decides it all," he murmured to her, boots echoing up the steps. She nodded, fingers tracing his patch. "We're iron. Uncle Vic, unbreakable." Inside, the courtroom hummed with restrained chaos, wood-paneled walls absorbing the murmur of spectators, the air thick with polished oak and stale proceedings. Judge Ellis presided, a stern figure with wire-rimmed glasses, her gavel a quiet threat on the bench. Harlan sat at the prosecution table, suit crisp but eyes darting like cornered prey, flanked by Frontier's lawyers in tailored armor. The state argued for Rosie's protective custody, painting the ranch as a den of outlaws, Victor as an unreliable ghost unfit for guardianship. Words sliced sharp, amnesiac drifter entangled in biker feuds, hardly a stable home for the child. Victor took the stand, the wooden rail cool under his palms, the room's tension coiling like smoke. Torres sat in the gallery, a subtle nod his only reassurance. "I forgot," Victor began, voice steady as canyon stone, "but she remembered for me." He rolled his sleeve, revealing the tattoo, the looping script drawing gasps from the back. Rosie's eyes met his from the witness bench beside Jack's, her presence a quiet anchor. He recounted it all, the crash's void, the roadside rescue, the touch that shattered amnesia like fragile ice. Elena's will surfaced then, authenticated by Mrs. Harlan's affidavit, cutting through the forgeries like a blade through silk. "This isn't about land or pipelines," Victor said, gaze locking on Harlan. "It's about promises kept. Elena trusted me with her daughter, with fighting the greed that took her. The Iron Promise isn't a gang. It's family, chosen, loyal, standing when the system's blind." Reese followed, his testimony a raw unraveling. Betrayal confessed in halting breaths, the coercion's grip detailed without excuse. "Frontier threatened my own, twisted me against brothers, but Elena pulled me from darkness once. I owe her light." The courtroom stirred, whispers rippling as Torres rose, presenting the federal exhibits. Bank trails glowing on projected screens, Harlan's signatures damning as fresh ink. The sheriff shifted, sweat beading despite the chill, his web exposed thread by thread, bribes for the pipeline's poisoned path, the crashes engineered to orphan and claim. The judge's pen scratched notes, her face a mask cracking with the weight of moral clarity. Harlan's counsel blustered, invoking eminent domain and public good, but the air had shifted, the room's gravity pulling toward truth. Rosie testified last, her voice small but piercing, climbing onto the chair with Jax's help. "Uncle Vic's my home. He promised Mommy. The bad men hurt us, but he remembers now." Tears traced her cheeks, but her chin lifted, echoing Elena's fire. The gallery, spectators drawn by the biker legend, leaned in, the chosen family's presence outside a thunderous echo through the walls. No violence, no spectacle, just unyielding honor, lealdad woven into every word. The judge recessed, the clock's tick amplifying the weight, rain pattering against the windows like impatient fingers. Victor held Rosie close in the hall, the crew's low voices a comforting rumble beyond the doors. Dilemmas had forged this moment. Forgive Reese's fall, trust feds amid corruption's taint, shield the innocent without becoming the storm. But purpose burned clear now. Redemption, not a solitary path, but a ride shared, scars mended in the heat of standing firm. The gavel fell hours later, the courtroom hushed as Ellis spoke. Custody granted to Victor Stone, legal guardian per Elena's will. Charges against the Iron Promise dismissed for lack of evidence. As for the corruption... Her eyes pinned Harlan. Federal investigation proceeds immediately. Bailiff, escort the sheriff. Gasps erupted, Harlan rising in protest only to be led away, his empire crumbling in the glare of justice's light. Frontier's suits paled. The pipeline halted pending probes. The land, Rosie's legacy, secured by truth's quiet blade. Outside, the rain had cleared, sun breaking through in golden shafts that gilded the bikes. The crew erupted in restrained cheers, engines firing in salute as Victor carried Rosie down the steps, her laughter free against his neck. Reese clasped his shoulder, eyes clear for the first time. Oath renewed, brother. Jax grinned, the family whole. Scars a map of survival. They mounted up, the convoy a serpent of light winding back to the ranch, the canyon welcoming them with open arms. Victor glanced at Rosie in the sidecar, her bear waving in the wind, the tattoo a warm seal on his soul. The valley bloomed under the afternoon glow, fences mended, the swing creaking anew with Rosie's joy. Victor pushed her gently, the chains singing soft, Elena's voice a whisper on the breeze. Promises had outlasted the void, loyalty a bridge over loss, justice a legacy etched deeper than ink. In this chosen family, redemption rode eternal, one silent, honorable mile at a time. The desert stretched vast, secrets unearthed, but the road ahead shimmered with hope, unbreakable as iron. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these stories of promises and redemption touch your soul, please subscribe for more tales from the open road. We'd be honored to have you along.